Hello, Diargos here. Welcome back to my Factorio series, the Manhattan project. I moved the area where we're going to assemble the nuclear reactor plant inserters up here because I've got some concrete being laid down there and just had a lot of bots flying around, so thought it'd be better to move it up here. So what we're doing, just to recap real quick, is we've got this nuclear power plant design. We're going to split it up into three parts: the left wing, the right wing, and this middle section here. And the idea is that I'm going to redesign the middle section right now. We're going to spread these out just a little bit to handle some circuit logic that will prevent inserters from just inserting a whole bunch of fuel cells into the reactors, because they burn even if they're not needed. They'll just use them up even if the turbines aren't running. And we don't want that. So what we're going to do instead is create some logic to handle the insertion. And what we want to do, I think, and I'm just kind of thinking about this, we want to insert only when I think the accumulator charge is less than 15%. So 15% is, so more than, like, say 5%, because the nuclear power plant's not going to run unless it's at least 500 degrees. So it needs a few seconds to run up to that. And then we want kind of low. We don't want to do like 50%, because if the accumulators get down to 50%, but then they recharge, like, so say they get down to like 48% or something like that, and then they just recharge, that's fine. That's just going to be using the solar farm as it should be used, right? 15% means that we don't have enough solar farm power probably, or we're getting close to that, so we want the nuclear power to kick on. So instead of just putting down a reactor right here, like just putting down that, I don't want to test with that, because if I'm inserting fuel cells, it's just going to use them up as I'm testing with them. It'll turn on even though it's not hooked up to anything. So we're going to have a surrogate. We're going to use a chest, and this chest will be my reactor, right? So if I insert a fuel cell into that, it means it's like it's been inserted into a reactor. We can think about it that way. So for the inserter, we're going to use a regular yellow inserter, and this is going to be the design we use kind of for everything, for all of the reactors, of course, the inserters for that. So we'll get to that part later, but right now this is just kind of proof of concept, prototype type of thing. We want to make sure that we override the stack size to 1, because we only want to insert 1. And I'm going to use a regular chest here, even though this would be a requester chest. So here the problem is we only want the inserter to insert into the chest if there's no fuel cells in it. But there's a problem with that, because let's say I dropped a bunch in here and I had that logic right. What would happen is if I dropped 2, say, I think I dropped all of them. What would happen is it would move over 1, right? And then that 1 would get instantly used, and turned into a used fuel cell. And then it would start burning down the red, the red bar. And then another one would get inserted. So if we just do that, what would happen is effectively we're always inserting 2 at a time, right? It's not just 1 and then waiting, because I don't want one sitting in there, because fuel cells run for 200 seconds, and in that time, so like no matter what you put these in, it's 200 seconds. In that time, it's possible that the accumulators could charge back up and be stabilized again, or I could put down some more solar panels or whatever, and so something could change, right? I don't want it to run for 400 seconds. I want it to run for the minimum amount of time, which is 200 seconds. Okay, so to do that, I have a couple of ideas, and we're going to try to test it out, see what works. No guarantees yet, but we'll figure something out. One of the conditions I want to check is I want to check the accumulators, right? I want to check for the charge is 15% or less. Okay, so I know that we're going to have something going on with the accumulators, and that's going to run into the inserter, right? But we'll probably have a decider next to it or something like that to handle the logic there. Because so if I hook this up, right? If I hook just like this to that, I could say only do it if you know, the fuel cell is less than 0, or if it's equal to 0, say, that would be fine. But remember, that's going to do 2 at a time. At best, it's going to be 2 at a time, and it's going to have another problem of that. I can't do any other conditions. I can't do less than 15%, right? So to kind of tackle both of those, that's what we're going to be doing now. So we don't even need to even have that connected like that, right? It's not going to even be connected there. What's going to happen is we're going to do something like, where is it? We're going to do something like this, where we have a final decider, kind of working backwards right now, who's going to be plugged into this, and he's going to say, you know, output some output green, right? And here's where we'll do this part later, what the input is. But this guy's only going to run if green is equal to 1, which is, or greater than 0, whatever, right? And what we want to do is we want to pulse this for 1 tick so that he just moves 1 over, right? It's not going to matter. What's in this chest doesn't matter. We don't care about that anymore. What we care about is all this other logic that we're going to build down here. And it's going to be the equivalent of nothing should be in there, right? So the idea that I have is I only want to run this inserter once every 200 seconds, right? I don't want it to go move over 1, that fuel cell gets used, and then move over a second time, and then it's done. That's twice in 200 seconds. I want it to wait 100 or 200 seconds. That's the time it takes to use up the fuel cell before it does anything. I'm sorry, I'm coughing. I have something stuck in my throat. Another thing that we need to kind of add into that logic is the accumulator charge, right? And then think about, I don't want a check. I don't want some loop running every 200 seconds and checking the accumulator, and then if the accumulator is less than 15, piping it over here, right? Because if I do just that, what would happen is I could get at 16% accumulator charge and then run a check, and it'd be fine. Be like, okay, don't put any fuel cell in. And then it goes back into its clock and it waits 200 more seconds. And then the accumulator could go to 15, 14, 13, 12, you know, all the way down to 0 and black out, like within a matter of 30 seconds, say. And then I'd have a whole 90 seconds or whatever it might be where it could be several minutes where it's not powering up because it's not checking, right? So what I want to do is I want to check for this, okay, all the time, every tick. And as soon as it gets to 15%, I want to say, okay, go ahead and move over once and start a clock, and then only ever move over again when that clock hits some 200 seconds, right? Something like that is what I want to do. And we're going to work on that now. Okay, so with that preamble out of the way, I think the first thing we can work on is getting a clock going, okay? So there's a whole bunch of ways to do this, but here's the way that I know. You get a couple of deciders and a couple of combinators, and you get yourself a pretty quick clock. Okay, I don't know how I want to lay this out. I know we only need one of these, and then they'll feed all of the inserters at once, right? It's not perfect because what would happen is I have all 8 run at the same time. I might only need 2, right? But we're not going to go that deep. Well, I think this will be fine. So we get a decider, and we say, okay, actually, how do I want to lay this out here? I want to have some extra space or something. I might want to move this around. Let's say this is going to output. Oops. Get yourself plenty of red wire and gray wire if you're going to do this. So we take the accumulator and hook up to the decider for it. And the reason why I'm doing that instead of going somewhere specifically is, well, you'll see. I'm gonna have multiple deciders kind of layered to act as AND gates essentially. Okay, so if A, which is, in my games, I always use A as the accumulators because that's the default value for the accumulator anyway, and it stands for accumulator. So let's say if A is, we can set this to something that's always true for now, so greater than 0 probably is good. That way we can just make sure it's like always running. But what we want to do is set some value like, let's say P for power. Right, and we'll pass that as 1. Actually, no. What I want to do is I want to use X, and I'll get to that in a second. So we're gonna power up a clock. We're gonna use that to power up a clock as well. So let's build the clock down here. Okay, so you get your first decider. Okay, and you're gonna have 2 values that you're comparing, right? That you're looping. That's why I picked X. So we're going to have an X value, and we're going to have a Y value, and we're going to output an X value equal to 1. And we'll set these to be equal to get it to work. If you don't set it to equal to, like if you say it's less than or greater than or not equal, then it's basically off. This is like turning the clock off that way, okay? And then what we want to do is output that X signal into a combinator, and all this does is we're going to multiply that 1 value by some number. Okay, let's hook that up. There we go. So now we take in X, okay, and we're going to output X as well, but we're going to multiply it first, so we just leave that like that. And here you can put in some number. And the thing to know about this is that this is the ticks, essentially, that we're going to be working with, right? And that there are 60 ticks in a second, right? So if you wanted to run it for 5 seconds, then you need to put in 5 times 60, okay? So this is just for 5 seconds, so that every 5 seconds we can see if something is working. If you do it for if you just put in 10 right here, whatever you're doing might happen so fast that you might not see it or might not be able to work with some of the mechanisms. Okay, so now we've got an X value that's being passed through, and now it's coming out, as you can see on the bottom of my on the right hand side there, the output signal is 300. So now X has a value of 300. So now we get another decider, and this is the one that's actually the clock decider, right? And we say when Y is less than our first value X, we want to output Y, and that's going to count up basically. And then when it gets equal to it, this is when it outputs the X as 1, right? And, well, you'll see it's kind of it's going to recursively feed back on itself. Not recursively, but it's going to feed back on itself. And to get it to actually do something, what we have to do is have a constant combinator. And what the constant combinator does is just constantly output some signal, right? So we want to constantly output 1 for the value of Y. And what that's going to do is it's going to add 1 every tick to Y value, okay? So we hook that in to the, I don't know did I hook this one up yet? I think I did. No, I didn't. Okay. So we're just passing this X value through, and we're passing a Y value through that's getting added every time. So that's the input count. You don't do 1 here, you do the input count, okay? And then here's the important part. Get yourself another wire and feed back the output of Y back in. That's how it actually adds up to itself, okay? Because it's going to get, you see it's running there, so it's already on. And the X value stays the same, it's at 300, and Y gets set to an increasing number, and then whenever it gets up to equal to be X, right, it changes back down to 1, okay? So this is like a basic clock system, right? Let me just show you everything again here, in case you wanted to see it. Okay. And we can put a light down to kind of see this in action. So we'll hook it up to the output here, and then enable this. so one way you can enable it is when x equals y, because that occurs every 5 seconds. So right, did it flash? Is it powered up? I don't think it's powered up actually. Oh, it is. Okay. Oh, I think I just saw a flicker. It's kind of hard to tell with this because it's, there you go. So you see it flickering. I don't know if that's too fast for my recorder, but what's happening is every time it goes to 300, it flicks. Or when Y gets reset. Okay, so that's the clock. So now we can set this to, oh, by the way, just to show you kind of how this constant combinator works. Right now, I set Y to 1. You have to actually select it. If you don't select it, it doesn't do anything. So you select it. You can turn it off at any time. You can see it's not, so it's paused at 270, right? Turn it back on. And if I select it and change the value to say like 5, what's going to happen is you'll see this is going up by 5 now, right? So it's 5 seconds divided by 5, so it's flickering every 1 second. If I go up even more, oh, see, doesn't do anything unless I select it. We could go up to, now it's getting faster and faster. Now it's, I don't know, I can tell that there's flickering here. It might be a solid color for you. And now it's solid for me at 500. That's because anything over the value that we want, it's occurring more frequently than the cap, right? So if I think it'd be 300 is the limit. So if I did 299, you can see that's the fastest flicker it's going to get before it's always on. So that's kind of cool, but we'll leave that at 1. And of course, if you change that to 0, then it would never run also, if I do that. Okay, so that's because it's adding Y. It is actually running. What it's doing is it's adding a value of 0 to the total, so it's not really making a difference. So we set that to 1, and now we've got ourselves a clock again. So in order to change this to work for 200 seconds instead of 5 seconds, what we have to do is change this number here, and we'll do that, and we do 60 times, and then it's 200 seconds. Okay, so that's 12,000. Yeah. Okay, 12,000. Does that sound right? 12K. So now it's going to run, and when it gets to this whole thing will pulse for 1 tick whenever it gets to 12,000 and then reset. So that'd be 200 seconds. I don't know if we want to test with that. We can probably lower this back down to 300 for now. I didn't save it. Okay. Gotta set it. Gotta get there. All right, there we go. Okay, good. All right, so we've got a clock to work with. Now, like I said, I don't want to just hook this up directly and have it so that it's just checking every 200 seconds. That wouldn't really work, right? So what we kind of have to do is tie this stuff together and okay, so it's charging back up now. What we can do is we can say, so this value of X here, right? That can act as kind of like an input for our constant combinator to be on or off, right? So we don't really care if this is ever above 15% or whatever it's set up. We don't really need the clock to run, and we don't need the input from the clock to be true, right? Going toward this right here. And I kind of show you what I mean here. Let's put a couple more down. Okay, so let's say we have, here's going to be the clock input, and here will be the accumulator input, right? So what we want to do is say, let's use P. If P equals 2, that's when we output go, green for go, right? Okay, so here we're gonna output P of 1, and here we're gonna output P of 1, and only when they're both true, when they're both on for that pulse, right, or however long it might be. We just want a pulse though. Then it's gonna send out green signal. Okay, so we want to hook that up there and to there. So now it's going to come in and get added together, right? So if just one of them is on, then it'll be P equals 1 and this won't work, which is what we want. Okay, so for setting this, what we need to do is basically what we did with this light, right? We would say X equals Y. Okay, and we hook it up like that. Okay, so every time that light flickers, we're gonna get an output signal. See, you can't see it because it happens so fast, but it's expanding. The screen is expanding down because it has an output signal of P equals 1. And I can kind of catch the P, but it's really fast. It's only one tick. Okay, so similarly over here, what we want to do is say A. Actually, what is this outputting? We can actually just use this direct one, I think. We don't even have to do that. We can say A is, I might tweak this a little bit later. You have to bear with me here. I'm kind of doing this as I go a little bit, or a lot of it. Okay, so now the accumulator, so now both of these have to be true. Now this is the setup that I was saying we don't really want. We don't want, right, this will only work every 200 seconds. If this is less than 15%. It's close to what we want. It's getting there, but it's not quite there. Now I'm seeing my clock has hit the time limit for the episode, so I'm going to end the episode here. But in the next episode, we'll wrap this up. We have a little bit more to do, and we'll install it then on the reactors and get that going. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.